Welcome everyone. It is IKYA Live. My name is Andy. I am Operations Manager here at IKYA Center. And IKYA Live is world news from the spiritual perspective and the only show in the world really giving you very practical advice from the spiritual perspective for your everyday life. Tonight we have a topic that is very much still in the news even today. Just about 10 days ago, Silicon Valley Bank in the United States went belly up, as we say. Basically, very shortly, to try to describe it, the investments that that bank made were of a nature that made their short-term risk not balanced with the long-term perspective. And when some of their customers needed cash, they didn't have enough on hand and they were not able to secure the money. That caused a classic bank run, but in 2023, a bank run happens much more quickly thanks to Twitter and the internet, and also the ability to access your money and account much more easily through apps and technology. So no lining up at the door for the bank, but rather the word spread online, things happen very quickly. Just as quickly and in a way kind of amazingly, the United States Federal Reserve stepped in, securing all deposits for that bank to prevent exactly what did then unfold over the last 10 days, which is the contagion in the economic system spreading to First Republic Bank and Signature Bank, and making this one of the largest bank collapses in history. It even crossed the borders to Switzerland, and Credit Suisse, which has had problems for some time, also needed to get some help and is being bailed out by UBS as of yesterday or this weekend. So, lots of turmoil in the economy, and lots of fear and concern about what's happening. Where do we go from here? What does this mean for my bank account, for my job, for our nation? All of that kind of stuff. Our job here at IKYA Live is to take a higher perspective, the spiritual perspective. And one of the most common questions that we get and that we have gotten with regard to this episode is, what is sort of the spiritual significance of the economy? What does it represent? What are we doing with it spiritually? And I think that's where we're going to start the conversation tonight. So IKYA, I ask you, what is the spiritual way to understand what the economy actually is?
Today, the economy is a religion. And much more so than in the past. And it's such, like when these things happen to the banks, it's like internal organ failure. Money today is basically the blood of our civilization. So when banks get into trouble, it's an indication of kind of blood contamination. But the fun thing about the whole thing about the economy, like those of you who've lived for a while, remember a time where the economy was not the main thing, right? The economy was not the main focus of society. And we had this idea that the economy was there to serve people. And now it seems like people are there to serve the economy. And there's a reason why this is happening. And, we'll just try to pull this apart a little bit from a spiritual perspective and see what is this in our evolution and what does this reflect. Now, we have to start with human nature. Humans are violent. They are competitive. They are transactional. These are the rules of survival. So, number one, when you have the rules of the game, the rules of survival, and it's about winning. You get the people who are better at this, they will gravitate to the top. And the rules of the game are basically whatever works. It's not honesty. It's not honor. It's not helping. It's winning. You know, when you win, you have the right to procreate. You know, you get the best out of everything. And that's the rules of survival that has followed us as a life form for a very, very long time. So it means that the rules are created on the bottom. When we see what's happening on top, because, you know, not just what's happening with the banks right now, but the complete corruption in our economy and the people on top, they're only there because they follow the rules of the game. Now, when you want to survive and you're competitive, those people will win, right? So people who display power, who display greed, who display the willingness to do anything to get to the top, they get to the top because those are the rules. And they are created by the people on the bottom. They have been part of our evolution. So it's not like this has just happened. It's just that the game has become more intensified over the last decades. And one of the most important reasons for this, and this is where it becomes more spiritual, it's that humans are very transactional. That's one of the fundamental rules of survival. All value is transactional value. Now, when you have, you know, something you like to sell, you can set the price, but it's the market that decides what this is worth. That's the transactional value. And that even applies to you as a person. Everything you do in life is transactional. Your conversations are about trying to sell yourself, trying to sell a point, with the intent of you positioning yourself at a certain level. Your career, like everything you want in life, are symbols that will help you project a certain value. And the thing is, like in the old days, when we lived in families and small communities and all of that, you didn't have a lot of options, right? You were who you were told that you were. And you were valued based on how much you contributed to your family or your group, and that was that. Right? And that was your life. But it also means that you were more content. And within the group, this is a thing that's often been said. It's like, you know, within a family there's socialism. Outside the family there's capitalism. And it's an oversimplification, but in many ways it's true. Because within a family or a small community, you do whatever you can, and then you get what you need. But beyond that, it's transactional, it's value, it's buying and selling. So, what has happened as we become more individualistic? We become even more transactional. Because when we exist in a larger unit, we have more of what we need, we have more of the resources, and also what defines us as a person. When we become more of an individual outside of a family structure or outside of a small community, we discover that, oh, I can actually influence this. I can send out signals, and the greater society will relate to that, and I can then manipulate my position. How do you do that? Through buying and selling. And not only that, it's also because you don't have all the resources you need. Just think of Japan, right? One of the reasons why they did so well is because they have no natural resources. They've hardly got anything. They have to buy absolutely everything. So they became really good at importing and then making stuff and then selling. They added value. Their whole economy is based on adding value. And that's what we become as individuals. We become so much more aware of, I need resources, and then I add value, and then I show the world that I add value. So the transactional part in our lives have increased as we've become more individualistic. Because then you're a smaller and smaller island with fewer and fewer resources. So then you need networks, right? You need to be part of something, and that's transactional. Think of networking. That's basically you projecting value and other people trying to also understand how do you add value to them, right? And there's this conversation going on all the time. But this is economy. And the interesting thing is, like, it's been good for the economy. This is one of the narratives that have been supported by, well, I could say, global corporations. Not as a conspiracy theory, but it's just a natural support of that narrative, that not being in relationships and being a single person is actually good for the economy. Because you seek more validation through transactional behaviors and stuff and things, because you need validation. When you are in a stable family, in a stable community, you need fewer things. That's also why people prefer to be in those kind of settings, because you are seen. In a big city where you are alone and nobody sees you, you have to project. So you become more vulnerable. But you also have to be more aggressive in how you sell yourself. And you need more stuff, right? Because you can communicate to many different groups and sell yourself and be in that transaction, because the ultimate goal is validation. You know, where do you belong in the hierarchy of life based on the rules of the game? So, we do this more and more. It's also offered us opportunity to be more of who we want to be instead of being limited by a family or group. But when it comes to human happiness, humans are more happy when they're stable, when they're in a family structure, when they know the people around them, and they need a lot less stuff. So our anxiety, or natural anxiety, coming from a lack of, one can say, structural validation, will force us into feeling unsatisfied, and we need more resources to be in that game, that transactional game. So, huge corporations, it's been part of their narrative and, you know, their thing to support the idea that we should all be single. We should not be in relationships. We should focus on ourselves, our own needs, our self-expression, all of that, which often in a relationship will cause conflict. Because in a relationship, you have to compromise, you have to negotiate, you have to accept that you can't just do whatever you want, you have responsibilities, right? So it's a whole different thing. But then you also feel that stability. So removing that stability has been something that the corporate world has been very happy accommodating. And now, fewer and fewer people are in stable relationships. And most relationships never last. And it's supported, we see it as a good thing. I have to do my thing, but we don't get happy. We get more stuff. We become more transactional. And us being more transactional in essence and way of thinking and consciousness is what has made the economy more important than it should be. Money has become more important than love. It's become the substitute for true validation. Now it's money validation through transactional behaviors. So this is also why, when we've seen over the last decades, money has become so much more important. Stuff, popular people, they get rich, and it's them getting rich that makes them popular. We all want to be like that because we think it validates us. Because we've lost what truly will give us that solid validation. And we're tricking ourselves. This is, in many ways, a blind alley in our civilization. And we have to figure out a way, have to back out of it. At the same time, as it's also given us opportunities to self-define. But one of the challenges that we get when we self-define is that we have to sell it. We have to be confirmed, otherwise it's not true to us. So we become more desperate. And if we see a part of the woke culture where everyone defines themselves and, make up their own genders and all of that, it's not true unless they force someone else to validate. Because that's who we are as humans. We need the outside world to validate. So we become so desperate and so unhappy and so depressed because we don't get the validation that we naturally would have in a stable family and community. So this is again why we get so concerned. This is why money has become what it is today. And for young people, they have no idea what it was like, 60s, 70s, 80s, where money was not that important at all. You had rich people, all of that, but the focus on economy, and the debates, the political climate around economy has changed drastically, and this is the reason. And we're all part of it today. And this is also what we need to do in your personal and spiritual process, is to understand that we're trapping ourselves in a transactional game where there's virtually no way out, and we just get miserable. The only way to get away from that is to have stable, loving relationships. Now, relationships today can be whatever, but we need to have committing long-term relationships with friends, family, whatever it is. Spending too much time on our individualism will lead to consumerism and this whole thing. So when we are in that mindset, we are contributing to the corrupt economy, right? Because that's the end result of it, and we might not see it. But I see it's basically, every time someone prays to Mary and Jesus, they are reinforcing the Catholic Church. Not because they're doing so directly, but they relate to the fundamental principle of the existence of the church. So it's like that. There was a question?
Yeah. Another way to look at the economy and money is that it's more like a language. It's a communication of values between individuals. And one trend over the last couple of decades has been trying to capture more of our world in that language, because up until let's say the 60s and 70s with the environmental movement and stuff, there's been no attempt by economists or financial systems to capture the value of natural resources or air or even social benefits, like as you're talking about with stable relationships and family structure and that kind of thing. From the spiritual perspective, is there a way to evolve that economic language to communicate all of those values more effectively and more directly without sort of continuing down this blind alley you're talking about?
I think it's already happening. And remember that all value is made up. There's no such thing, as inherent value. It's just something that's made up based on how someone values something based on their own needs and how that will help them. And the whole world economy is basically that. But yes, like the thing around the whole crypto thing, for instance, what is interesting about it is it takes as a given that all value is made up. Now, when you have institutions setting value, for instance, for currencies, it's based on, all these different aspects of the economy. It's still a game. It's still not real, right? And when it comes to expressing yourself, you can express yourself within the rules of the game, right? Again, to be a winner in the official system, you have to be highly transactional. You have to be hooked on power. You need to be greedy. You need to be very individualistic. And you can't care about anything but yourself, because that is what survival is. It's winning, right? And so it means then those people, they will gravitate to the top. With crypto, people have tried to come up with new ways of creating value and say, well, okay, if value is made up, it means that we can value whatever we want and turn that into a currency, and we can support that. And it's really interesting because, again, this is what value is. Whenever someone appreciates something, sure, that's valuable, but it can be for other reasons than contributing to the economy. It can be based on what it stands for, what it represents, and that can become a currency. We're in the very early stages of this. This will not be killed. One's tried to kill it now for many, many years. It's impossible because the idea is too good. And it's still very immature. But the idea is closer to understanding what value is and giving people ways to express themselves through value systems. And just like we have different official currencies today, think of a world where you can decide what type of currency you relate to based on your value system. It's that, and so even the currencies you use to pay for things can represent who you are, right? And you can be part of lifting the world in a certain direction simply by using certain currencies. We will get there. It will take time. This is just the very beginning, but it's a lot of fun. So it becomes more creative and less institutional, because the thing is with the crypto is it's decentralized. That's the idea, right? That it should be something that is more organic. Instead of when it's institutionalized, it can be manipulated, and it is. It's very manipulated and extremely corrupt. Of course, crypto can also be corrupted, and a lot of it is, because we're dealing with humans here. But it's still, over time, it will offer humans ways to be more expressive through also kind of financial instruments. So I find that really interesting. And remember, this is just the very beginning. This is like the reinvention of money. It will take several hundred years, right? But as an idea, it's definitely on the right track.
Money is, it's always a lot of emotions connected to it. And I feel like it's a lot more switches. We expected the housing market to go down, and it didn't go down after all. And then it seems like it's going to go well, and then we're poor. And I can feel that also my emotions that I have connected to money switches a lot more. The other day I felt shame because someone was going to come and visit my house. I felt I had too much. The day after I was afraid of getting poor. I mean, it's like,
Yes.
It's really switches.
Yeah.
And I wondered, with all of the things going on in the economy now, is it also a period where we clean out a lot of our belief systems around money? Is this...
We can hope, because what you're saying is so interesting, because if we go back, a few decades, you wouldn't have felt that way. As I say, it's because the transactional part of our society has increased. So how other people see and what you have and whatnot, they're different currencies, right? And then you have to relate to, what do these different currencies mean to that person? How will they value me? Because we still seek the outer validation. It's one of the things we developed early on in evolution to keep us together. Like, your opinion matters more to me than the one of a stranger. So it's that. So we do care, and in a way that's a good thing. When someone's opinion means something to us, it simply means that we see them as important to us. So we exchange validation. That's also part of the transaction. But again, because this has been amplified so much over the last few decades, we become very imbalanced. around this. Just like, it's just stuff. It's not just stuff anymore, because our whole sense of value as a person is now part of the economy. Because it's also the reason why we buy stuff. Remember, when we buy anything, we do not only think of why, like, I like this. Yeah, why? Very often it's because it's how you think other people will relate to you if you have this item. I notice when I'm in a store, most people have this thought process. How will other people see me wearing this, piece of clothing, or having this sofa or this car? And that will be the deciding factor. I've seen so many people buying not what they actually want, but something else, because they think that will enhance their value in society. Right? So it's behind everything we do. So, okay, so that's the first thing. The other part of it is that since we now live in a globalized economy, it's so intertwined that in one way it's less vulnerable. It can take more because we have more buffer systems. For each time, the system learns and becomes more robust. So it means that when we talk, oh, Great Depression, no. Things happen that, yes, 30 years ago, it would go absolutely horrendously wrong. Now we have so many buffer systems that we will still feel them, but we don't have to go to a place where everything falls apart. When we look at where we are today, right, we have basically World War III happening, and we've had the whole COVID thing, we have supply chain issues. Like a few decades ago, that would have been the end of it. We would now experience a total recession and depression and all of it. And we're not, because we're more robust now, we know more. So everything stabilizes and we learn. So in that way, we can take more. But as with everything, when we can take more, there will be even more, right? Because it will pile up to make it more complex, because that's a spiritual journey. We never stay at our current level of competence. This is why now, to heat things up, we need multiple things happening at once, right? And that's what we can see. We never get one hit anymore, right? We get a multi-layered cake of devilry, and that's every time, because we have reached a level of complexity where we also need to deal with this, and it's also much more interesting. So that's also part of it. So in a way, there's no need to worry, but at the same time, I should say, we're connected more emotionally to the economy now than we used to, because it has become a language of self-expression, and the whole transactional part of our lives have taken over. And it's interesting when we become aware of everything we do today being transactional, and we look at it, it can be a shocking discovery. Because I'm just doing this, I'm just like, and when you look at it and you're analyzing, so I'm fucking buying and selling the entire time. So stopping doing that is very, very difficult, because it's the only reason humans do anything today. And again, it fuels the economy, because this is where we start. And the bank system and the financial industry, the most kind of corrupt, vile industry in the world, is the result. But normal people create the rules. And I'll get back to that in a while. First you.
I was just thinking about how the collapse of these banks has to do with capital, has to do massive, massive movements of capital. And a couple of years ago, the New York Times did this amazing series where they talked about where the capital in America came from, because America is the biggest collection of capital anyway. And what they showed through this series was that it came from slavery, that the slavery that took place in the 16, 17, 1800s led to the collection of capital, which is basically the whole foundation of the Rockefellers, all of the different huge amounts of wealth in the U.S. And so it's always struck me as kind of a strange thing that that's the basis of something which is so highly valued in that society. And I guess my question is more about how does that begin to get evened out or worked out somehow?
First, there are more slaves in the world today than there were in those times. And also, slaves are still part of building the biggest concentration of wealth. Nothing has changed. And you see the same thing in Europe. You know, the economy needed slaves. Now it needs consumers, right? And so it's still there. It's still humans manipulating themselves, but humans make the rules. Now, even with slavery, was because we needed to do things and people weren't willing to do them. So we can force people to do them. It was that simple. So you had slaves all over the world. So it's always normal people. And like one thing that I find really interesting, because people believe that, oh, this is control from the top. It's not. Now, when it comes to especially the American version of capitalism, there's something really interesting. Is that, because one of the questions is today, like, why don't we have a revolution, for instance, in the States, where there's more concentration of wealth and the divide between poor and rich is greater than ever in history? Why is there not a revolution? And my answer to that is because of the possibility of economic migration. Now, every place where we've had revolution, it's because kind of economic and class migration has not been possible. That's really what has triggered it. Now, the current Western version, especially the American one, is like a lottery. In theory, you can migrate. You can say, if you work hard, you just have to get up in the morning and do your best, and you will migrate, and you can get rich. Anyone can get rich, and it's simply not true. It's just like the lottery, because somebody wins the lottery. Like, it's actually possible. People win the lottery, but it's a terrible career strategy, right? But because it's possible, people want. For instance, when there have been surveys like, are there like billion-dollar, prizes? Should they be divided so more people can win? People say no. Even that would increase their chance of winning. Wouldn't $10 million be enough? No, they want it to be $1 billion, and one person winning it, because it's the hope, it's the dream. So it means that even though they have no chance in hell, the dream and the idea that it could be possible make them buy into and buy the lottery tickets. It's the same thing with today's capitalism. When you are kind of poor and lower middle class, and you tell yourself the story, well, I can migrate. I have the opportunity. This is the American dream, and I can work hard. You want rich people to be richer, because that could be me, because you believe in the migration. Although signs will show you that it's not happening. It's just like winning the lottery. It hardly ever happens. So, and very often when it happens, it's not because of you. It's circumstantial. You may have the best idea, but you need the best people, you need funding, this, that. There's so many different factors that are beyond your control that will trigger your success, not your own work. But we want the dream. So when we have the even theoretical opportunity to migrate, we will support a system where the rich get richer and the poor gets poorer, because that keeps the dream alive, right? So people are tricking themselves. But again, the genius part for the rich is the narrative that you could be the lucky one. Next time, maybe it's you. Without it, there would have been a revolution in the United States already. So this is both, in a way, the beauty and the alluring part of how the Western capitalism has developed. It does create this divide, and poor people will support it in the hope that one day it could be them. Mm-hmm.
So the economy is money, transaction, exchange, and communication of values. What does the bank which is literally a four-letter word. What does the bank as a manifestation represent from a spiritual perspective?
Now, they represent the embodiment of all of this. Everything that is part of our consciousness will need embodiment. And this collective philosophy of value and transaction and all of that needs that embodiment, because it means that, you know, money is also wonderful in the way that we can then allocate our own resources and we can make things happen and manifest and all of that. But I'm talking about beyond that level. It becomes an entity representing these values, these rules of the game. And we could have had a banking system that is not corrupt, led by good people. But unfortunately, humans have not made those rules. It's not how we think. We're still very much animals when it comes to our own survival. And it's about winning and the winner takes all. That's always been the case in survival. It's not about the winner takes care of everybody else. It's not how evolution works. As I often use that example, when you look at apes, also chimpanzees and gorillas and all that, in many groups you will find when there's a new male taking over as a leader, he will kill all the babies. He will kill all children to make sure that from now on it's his DNA, because he has proven himself to be stronger. And it means that when all the kids are his, it will improve this group's chance of survival. It's how evolution works. So these are the ones who lead the banks. These are the ones who are working in the financial industry because we want them to. And that's the thing. It's not from the top down, it's from the bottom up, based on how we think and feel about ourselves. It's important spiritually that we do understand that that is how something then gradually forms into manifestation as it purifies. It's, you know, it's a basically process of distillation, you know, where it gets pure and pure until you have the pure essence. That's the financial industry. And it's ugly because these patterns they're very animalistic. And often what you find in the financial industry is that they're very much animals. When you look at their values and how they think and how they operate, they are apes, because these parts of us are extremely animalistic. So banks simply represent that heart of these rules, because now those rules are everything. It's the main rules of the game. So they just basically manage all of that, but they represent, and not just banks, but the whole financial industry, they represent this part of how we deal with our own transactional survival in this world. And this is also why we need to mirror ourselves in it, because again, they are the product of our consciousness, mindset, and behaviors. They're not the ones instructing. And this is also why when people try to change institutional structures, they're never successful. Because again, manifestation is the result of consciousness, not the other way around.
I was wondering about, back to that blind alley you were talking about earlier, to be able to support more of a spiritual path and sort of focusing my awareness on how to create something else. Is it like go more for a spiritual purpose and trying to manifest that in the world and use that as my guidance to manifest something?
I think, you know, it's an interesting question, like how do we do this? Because the initial thought human will have is like, I want to change the world, right? That this should change, I should do things differently. But the only change worth having is within. And it's just mirroring ourselves and recognizing, oh, I'm actually part of this. How can I not be part of this? It's not canceling your bank account. It's not being part of that validation game. It's looking at how we make everything transactional. When we are in the state of love, as I hope many of you have experienced, we become generous. And not in a transactional way, because generosity can also be, well, I'm so giving, so now I expect you. You know, in many relationships, this will come up in conversation during conflict. I give and give, and you give me nothing. You know, very generous. But it's because relationships have become transactional. When we're in the state of love, we couldn't care less. Because we know that when we give, we receive love from within. It's love being expressed. And yeah, life is giving through me, but it's not me giving. And I really don't care what happens to it, because I just follow that flow. And I'm filled. And then we don't even need validation, because when we open ourselves to that flow, it's all there. So we don't need stuff to tell the story about who we are, because we have no need to tell a story about who we are to anyone. We only do that to get the confirmation that I am this person that I claim to be. And the spiritual journey is about peeling away all of that, peeling away the ego, peeling away identity and stories, so that what we are authentically, spiritually, can just be revealed. And as we get closer to that, all the other stuff becomes less interesting. We can enjoy being here. We can enjoy stuff. It's such a big misunderstanding that when you're on a spiritual path, you should be poor. Sometimes people also talk to me and, in a way, expect me to like live in a kind of cardboard box in the woods somewhere. It's like, because they think that's more spiritual. I shouldn't have a home, I shouldn't have a car, I live in this society. It's just matter. One can enjoy being here, one can enjoy matter, just like one can enjoy art. Well, there's so much beauty in the world, but you can enjoy it without turning it into a story about who you think that the world should tell you that you are. It's that, right? So when we learn to grow out of seeking confirmation, I've also said that is one of the biggest transformation points spiritually as a person we can move into. Because that search for validation in our society has become everything. So when we're able to not do that, and we can't do it just by suppressing it, because then it will come out somehow. It's growing past it. Well, the only way to grow past it is through giving, for no reason at all. And being in a state of love where you simply connect and you kind of exchange and you share, and it has no other purpose. But this is the wonderful thing about love. It connects you. It makes you naturally detached. And it changes all your intentions to just being an extension of love. And who you are as a person and what you do becomes, in a way, very unimportant. And we do all of these things in the world because we don't have an active experience of true love. And we rob ourselves of the opportunity, what we're doing today, through individualism, because we trick ourselves into believing that I need to love myself and I need to show the world who I am. And often what we do is that we're in a state of pain, and then we try to manipulate the world into confirming that we're someone that we want to be. And no matter how much we try, we end up being miserable because it's not who we are. Often when we are in long-term relationships, also in a family structure, they've known us for a while, so no matter what we say, they know us, right? There's something wonderful about that. And it makes us relax. And we will be mirrored because that is what we should seek. Mirroring, not confirmation. Now, the difference between the two. Mirroring is the listening process, where what we're actually doing and saying and what we're actually sending out will be shown to us. Confirmation and validation is us projecting and wanting a story about ourselves to be true. Right? So it's two very, very different kind of lines of communication. So mirroring will bring us closer to truth because that's basically standing in front of the mirror, seeing and listening what the world is giving back to us so we can learn what am I doing that is authentic, what am I doing that is inauthentic, what's working, what's not, how am I part of healing myself from the world, how am I creating blockages, and the other part is just like, I want to be seen for who I believe that I should be, and if you don't see me, you're violating my rights. It's all of that, and the world is full of it right now. In families and committing relationships, we get mirroring. We get mirrored every day, right? Because we see ourselves more clearly through people we know. And it goes deeper because we can't just choose to ignore them, right? So we'll see ourselves more clearly, and it's not always what we want to see. And this is the thing with today's individualism. Many people, they choose to let go of any mirror that will show them who they are. And then they will just make something up to self-medicate through creating even more identity, which will blur their vision and make them see themselves even less clearly. But that will boost the economy, so at least it's good for something. But look at what a lot of young people are doing today, and you also understand why they're so miserable. They step away from their families, they step away from people who actually see them because they want to be something else. And they're all miserable, right? Commitment, long-term relationships, no matter what it is, it could be friends, it could be like however you want to form relationships, please do. We're at a point in human history, especially in the West, again, where individualism and consumerism have tricked us completely, and now we're becoming sick. This level of projected individualism is an illness, and it increases the corruption in the economy. And the only way to heal it is to take a step back and wanting to figure out who actually am I? Not who do I want to be, but who am I authentically? And start listening and setting yourself free from that whole game, right? And so there's less self-expression and more listening, right? We need more time to reflect. We need to be more quiet. We need to connect with ourselves, our hearts, with nature, with people who love us. And we need to love other people and love nature more. And that's the first step of how we kind of pull away from all of this.
This might be a really stupid question, but
Good.
I'm thinking about currency that we use. Currency is a way for me to bake my bread, convert it into money, and then use that money to then buy. So it's an energetic transfer, but it's a medium between the two. Mm-hmm. What would it be like if there was a currency for love? Or is that even a crazy idea?
No, it's not a crazy idea. I think this is the basic idea behind crypto. That whatever value system you apply that can be turned into a currency. But love is very difficult because, like, how do you define it? You know, it has to be an objective something, you know, that people can observe and then decide, yeah, this is something. So, but I'm sure there will be currencies where that will be tried. But again, money itself is not the problem, right? Because it's not about anything outside of us. That's just the symptom. It's how we use it. Again, how we have, as a society and as individuals, have become very imbalanced, believing that money and the economy is everything, where it should just be a very small part, because it should be about baking the bread. It should be about what we put into it, how it affects other people. So it's the quality and the intention and the sharing, and with everything we do, wanting to make the world a better place. When we want to win, it's about exploiting. And when you look at how corporations do it, it's like put as little in it as possible and then oversell it. Try to tell people a story that is better than it is through advertising and storytelling, so they get less than they're actually paying for. It's the opposite of what we should be doing. We should add true value. And for me, value spiritually is when something passeth through us and it kind of amplifies how it will make someone grow and heal. Everything we do, everything we give should have that effect. And for instance, when it comes to food, as we all know, love is the most important ingredient, right? And it's real. When something is made with love, it has a different effect on people. For real. And people who've been experimenting with this, they know. A meal made with love and loving intention will have a very different effect on people than if it's just like, you know, made to get it done, right? Because it's a medium. Money is simply the neutral medium, right? But it's also interesting that when we value, you know, something neutral, it means that we can make it into whatever we want it to be, which then becomes the purest essence of the rules of the game. And now for many people, when we go back in time, money was a way to achieve things. It was a resource so that you could create, you could build this or that. Today, people want money. That has become the goal in itself. So it's not what you have, but it's how much it's worth, right? We're flipped it around completely. And that is a part of why where we are today is so unhealthy. And it will take, you know, at least till mid next century before humans start moving past this. But it's just such an interesting, weird place to be, where we're trapped in this game where everything is about money and value, even when we think it's not.
I was at a conference last week in Paris, and there was a bunch of venture capital, private equity leaders who were talking, and I was struck by the fact that so much of what they place value on is growth. It's growth, 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 over and over again. And I started to wonder if that's part of the insanity of the system that we've built up. I'd love to hear you say something about that.
Absolutely. Growth today is about greed. It's not about growth, right? Because if we think of like growth for real, that is making things grow, and that's a good thing. But it's interesting when we talk about growth from an economical standpoint, is how much can we exploit? How much money can we print? You know, it's all exploitation, sucking out as much as possible. That will show itself as economic growth, but it's not really growing anything. Often the effect in nature and in people is the opposite. You know, so yeah, it takes a while to change this culture, because growth for real should be the main focus. But the understanding of it today is completely nuts. It's completely corrupt. And just sucking out as much money as possible and creating my money, is seen as a good thing, right? It's what everybody wants because we want the money. We don't care about how we get there or the implications. And, this happens at the same time as humans are telling themselves, ooh, we're concerned about the environment. Ooh, we want sustainability, right? And these are the same companies often. It's mind-boggling, but at the same time, it's completely natural because they still represent what's happening in the collective consciousness. This is why we all have to look at ourselves, mirror ourselves in it, and see, what am I doing in my own life? And see that, yeah, my personal choices matter. Not necessarily that you will be saving the world, because that's not the point. Nobody needs saving, and this whole culture is simply a place where we incarnate to work out our karma and to see where we're at so we can change and heal. But what we do has the effect of healing ourselves. And then we can vibrate something else. Then we'll be part of lifting the consciousness. As I said so many times before, criticism is not a solution. Yelling and screaming and blaming is not solution. It's not healing. It's not bringing the world forward. And a lot of young people today, they're kind of in that mindset where they think if they just scream and yell and blame and cancel, that somehow is a contribution. I think it's even worse than being part of destroying the planet, because at least then you're doing something. At least then you're manifesting. At least then you have a chance of learning by taking part. Just criticizing and believing that you're better for some reason without having done anything is the absolute worst option. So please don't do that.
As we move to a conclusion for tonight, what about that spiritual advice for practical life? There will be other bank collapses, crypto booms and crypto busts. How can we think about these kinds of events and the economy in general from a spiritual perspective, and how can we kind of navigate more smoothly going forward from here?
Yes, I will answer that, and then we'll have another question. So now the first thing is, when, it's just like fashion. When you're young and then there's a certain fashion, ooh, they just came up with this. And when you're 6, it's like, yeah, right, I've lived through that 4 times already, It's that. Seeing things in longer lines will give you perspective. Learning from history, from a horizontal perspective, learning from history, seeing what we've gone through as humanity before. I always think in very long lines. It's not just, our current culture and civilization. I look at the whole evolution and see the different waves and how things happen and why, because it's fun. And when you try to at least look at the longer lines in history and educate yourself about history and try to also observe these kind of movements, you'll also see why they are necessary. Because they're absolutely necessary. Things happen because they are expression of our consciousness. This happens both in our private life. So everything that happens around you will be reflections of what you are thinking and feeling and where you are in your evolution. That will be shown to you. So by interacting with the different manifestations and situations, you will dissolve your own karma. It's the same process collectively. So when something happens, it's because, yeah, this is where we're at. And remember, the rule of the game, when you boil it all together, it's survival. Nobody's trying to destroy all of us. Even when we try to destroy ourselves, we're not trying to destroy ourselves because it's about winning with a threat of destroying everyone. Because that's just the power game. But everybody wants to survive. Everybody wants to win. It's in our genetics. So That's why, in a way, we just have to look at the longer lines and say, oh, you're right, we've been here before in different ways. We always figure it out. And if there's one thing we can learn from history, when we look at our current history over the last 2,000 years, everything keeps getting better. It's just how it gets better is through terrible things. You know, that's also the weird thing is the result of something terrible is always things getting better, because it's when we realize, oh, that didn't work, so we improve it. Oh, that didn't work. It's just basically, you know, just around your house, right? There are always things to do, and we don't do them until they annoy us enough. Okay, like, you know, if there's, like, let's say there's a nail, you know, sticking out, and when you hit your toe on it, like, enough times, you will do something about it, right? It's all of these different things. We only do them when they annoy us. And this is why we need to go through terrible things until we're willing to then figure out something better. So that's what we do. Even a war is just that nail. It means that we could have figured out, we could have worked on our conflicts in different ways, but nah, we didn't get around to it because we're lazy. So it's just human nature, it's human history. So just think of it as all these chores around the house that we simply don't do because we're lazy and we're comfortable and it's not that important, until we get annoyed and we get aggressive. Just like, again, you know, when you step on a nail and you scream and yell and all of that. That's basically what a war is. So it's just human nature. And then over time, we will fix the house, you know, and we do this. Humans will not change for a very, very, very long time. So just look at human history and see that for every terrible thing that happens, the result is we find better solutions. Every solution that has worked better has come because of something that didn't work and caused pain. In your own life, it's the same thing. Every improvement for real came through pain, came through suffering. It's how we operate. There's nothing wrong with that. So looking at this from afar and both being loving when it comes to human nature and how we are, but also seeing these longer lines, it will make us relax, right? It will make us just, you know, not take things too seriously, so we don't have to be afraid. Because, you know, the worse it is, the better it will become. And so, like, the most important thing that happened in Europe for a very long time was Second World War. It was a terrible thing, but everything just exploded afterwards, right? And you can see that throughout human history. Whenever there's been like really big, terrible events, it's been a positive explosion happening afterwards. So one can anticipate that, you know, in this phase of human history, yeah, it's lining up. You know, it's, you know, on your marks, you know, get ready. And that's basically where we are. We will see such a wonderful explosion of creativity, human ingenuity, and our society moving in a better direction after this phase. So this is necessary. And, you know, again, when you look at human history, you can see this. And then there's no reason to be afraid, because humans do not destroy themselves. We want to survive, right? It's just we disagree on how. And that's it. But nobody wants to end anything. Humans are competitive and they want to win. Dying is not winning. So, you know, just accept human nature, and also accept that throughout human history, everything gets better all the time.
A few episodes back, you talked about artificial intelligence, and it becomes so much faster on us than I could ever imagine, and it will take our jobs pair and money. What is going to happen to our economy when, how is things going to get structured in the future?
Yes. Remember that it will take time for the culture to adapt to artificial intelligence. We will have a phase where many people will lose their jobs. I'm talking like many people. Because companies today, and this is the funny thing, when they make more money, it's good for the economy. Ooh, that's great. And people get poorer because they don't see how money is being distributed. It's just like, yeah, companies make a lot of money, that's good for the economy. But people lose their jobs, and they get poor. And it's the same thing, for instance, in the States, where, oh, like China took over. No, it's not that. It's robotics. It's automation. That's basically what killed the jobs. With artificial intelligence, it will be in a whole different level because most jobs will be taken over by artificial intelligence. And we'll get to a point where people get poorer and poorer. Who will buy this stuff, right? You need to have consumers, otherwise you can't produce stuff. So it's that whole thing. So at some point, the economy will change. Number one, there will be different ways of making money. As I said, when you look at influencers today, that's a start of understanding where we're heading. You can monetize on being you. One example I've used is I saw this woman, like there's several people. She's growing vegetables to show them on social media, right? Farmers 100 years ago would like, what? What? Right? Because it's not about farming. It's about the storytelling, about the joy of growing your own vegetables, and it's that. She earns more money than any farmer, right? And because that has become a product. And this is where we're heading, where personal expression will be monetized. Because again, also with the thought of how crypto works, anything can be of value if someone wants it. So when you look at many of the richest people on social media, what do they actually do? Yeah, it's that. It's whatever people think is interesting, that's how they make money. And it also has a lot of these makeup influencers, they're just selling makeup to each other. It's just insane, but they make a lot of money. So the world is changing where you don't have to do kind of like factory work. That will be taken over. But personal expression, businesses, that will kind of boost, right? And if I think the economy 100 years from now will be much more about who you are as an individual, but how that will be translated into products, that can be taken care of. So producing things will not be a thing. It's the premise. So the real products that will create kind of value will be who you are. So education will have to be about what is your gift, what you're bringing into the world. You have to understand, and that will be then the journey of understanding the true individualism, which is uniqueness. It's not about forcing people to see you a certain way, but saying you have to bring something, right? It's what is your flavor, I've talked with some people about, the image of ice cream, that you don't have to invent ice cream, you just have to invent your flavor. So invention will be different, right? It's like, how can you come up with something that's completely unique that represents you? So the way of thinking around productive work will change tremendously, but everything that has to do with producing, yeah, that will be taken over. And it will happen quickly. As I say, the economy will be difficult to negotiate this as it gets to the point where there will be not enough consumers to buy products. And so when one looks at, for instance, basic universal income, that will be one model, but we will still, as humans, need hierarchies because we are competitive. So we will not be happy with this receiving money. We will find ways to monetize on whatever it is that we can put into a competitive scheme. Because how else can we decide who the winners are, right? So this is why basic universal income will not work. Humans will figure out how to do this. And because, for instance, when we look at artificial intelligence today, when it comes to artwork and stuff, what they do is simply taking whatever is in existence already and combine it in new ways. Yeah, they can't channel. Right, so this is also kind of the spiritual journey where the channeling will become more important. Because innovation cannot just be combining what's already there, because artificial intelligence can do that, but they can't channel. So it gives people the opportunity of like lifting their consciousness and working in a different way. Because this is really about lifting the consciousness of people, how we are together and how we live as people. But this, how to work with consciousness and how to kind of bring that into the game of survival, human today cannot even begin to understand or imagine what this will be like. But this is where we're heading. So artificial intelligence will discipline people into having to stretch into what's unique, right? So that's the good thing. It means that a lot of the things that we talk about in spiritual work today, that will be taught in schools because there is no alternative. Otherwise, why should we even exist? So we can't continue to exist the way we do today. But we will figure out how to then kind of release the idea that we have to kind of produce things.
But because there will be so much artificial produced things, do you think we also will become more quality focused on authenticity, that we will see
Yes.
it more easily, that
Yes.
what's really real and
But
what...
it's the idea that will matter, not the manifestation.
Yeah.
So once it's done, it's done. Right? So it's that. So we can have like waves, like one idea can become like viral. We could have viral products. And then we've had that for one day. And then, you know, because everything will be kind of sustainable, it will be printed and disintegrated. So we can have like whatever. So we will have like waves of things that are interesting, but then there's a new idea the next day. So we will relate to matter in a very, very different way. It will be the idea itself that matters, not the execution.
And if I can use you, Sarah, I'm sitting next to Sarah Shaka, which is a nutritional really specialist. So will it then, for instance, not even be her giving people the nutrition, but the idea of the nutrition, that will be it?
Yes, and why, and also the personal journey and expression. And also, friends, like, you know, working with consciousness through nutrition and looking at the journey and the spiritual evolution, because that cannot be reduced to, yeah, I look at your blood work and you need a little bit more of that, a little bit, because it's not about that. It's about turning it around. How can we express? How can we be an active part in our own journeys and understand it and see the correlation between our consciousness, our karma, and our physical expressions, right? This will become more of that kind of foundation level where humans will be, and the rest will be taken care of. So it's an opportunity to lift, but it will be a shocking change, and many people won't make it. But remember that there will be more advanced consciousness incarnating into humans. It's already happening, but there will definitely be a kind of generational shift when it comes to what type of individuals, what type of consciousness will choose to incarnate in the human form. So that's fun. But again, just see what's happening in the economy now. It's just a minor kind of like, you know, adjustment. It's not big. As I say, it's very complex. And focus on the longer lines. Focus on the fun. Focus on humans collectively learning. And for you to pull out the validation game completely. Stop validating others. Love them. Stop seeking validation. Love yourself and give others the opportunity to nurture and love you for real. Be generous. Be positive. Be a healing presence to yourself and others. Because that really should be the economy, not the other stuff.
Thank you, IKYA. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight on IKYA Live. We've already set our topic for next Monday night at 7 o'clock. We're going to be looking at mass shootings and other violent acts, as there was a mass shooting recently in Germany, and we have an enthusiastic group of IKYA Live fans down in Munich who would like to talk about that. And so it's definitely something affecting the planet. So we'll be looking at the spiritual perspective of mass shootings and acts of violence next Monday. So from all of us here at IKYA Center, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next Monday. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And until next time, be well. Thank you from IKYA Center.